Can games help us develop habits that cultivate happiness? On this episode of Board Game Faith, the bi-weekly podcast exploring the intersection of board games, spirituality, and faith. My name is Daniel Hilty.
And my name is Kevin Taylor.
And we are so happy to welcome you to this time together. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending part of your day with us. Today,
tuning in. There's a dated phrase.
Oh, I know. Does anyone tune in anymore?
Yeah, I guess that was radio.
I guess if we're like the podcast is like on a CB or something, we could tune in. A CB based podcast. Oh, that's our niche, Kevin.
That is our niche.
I love it. And we could begin every episode by saying breaker, breaker.
We could. It would just be a mobile.
Yeah.
It'd be a
what does that even mean?
YouTube stream something. Breaker, breaker. I don't know. Breaking?
Why they say breaker, breaker? I don't know.
Breaker.
But then I would feel compelled to refer to you as my good buddy, which you
That's
are
right.
anyway.
That's right.
But
plus, we can make money.
We could be each other's good buddies.
We could just deliver product. Board games.
That's true. Yeah.
And a rig.
And faith. Yeah, and a rig. A board game faith rig. That'd be awesome. I'm down for it. After we get the board game faith like helicopter, the board game faith semi is next. That's awesome.
Fleet.
But today our discussion is going to be guided by part 2 of our look at a book, Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal. We're going to be looking at chapters 10 and 13. And the subtitle of her book is Why Games Make Us Better and How They Can Change the World. But if you've listened to this podcast before, you are aware already that this is a clap on technology activated podcast. We really can't get started until we clap. And so we're going to play a little game to get us started. Kevin, it's our tried and true favorite here. We're going to be doing an improv skit that smushes together some sort of movie scenario, book scenario, some scene, and a randomly picked game from the top 200 games of Board Game Geek, which is an online board game resource. And Kevin and I have touched bases already. Our scenario today is we are castaways on a deserted island, and the game
I know
was
this feeling.
randomly selected.
It's all I felt for 50 years.
I know. On a deserted island, castaway on a deserted island.
Exactly.
Or just channel the last however many years.
Yes.
And the game randomly selected is possibly I would say probably is the oldest game on Board Game Geek, which is the game of Go, number 190 on Board Game Geek. The ancient game of Go, created thousands of years ago, a couple thousand years ago in China. Have you ever played Go, Kevin?
I've never played a real game. I tried to learn the rules, and I got an app on the phone to teach me, and I've heard a lot about it, but it's supposed to only have like 3 rules, but I still don't understand them. I don't know. There's something. It's supposed to be very intuitive, and I just it's strange, but it's supposed to be awesome. And I watched the documentary. Did you see that about the AI attempt to have an AI play Go?
Yes, I did.
It's on Netflix or something.
And it won, right?
Really interesting. I think.
Yeah.
So in the end, they did, but it took a while for a computer to learn to play Go. Yeah.
I've had a similar experience. I downloaded it on the app because I've heard so much about it, and for some reason, even though it was supposed to be so simple, I've really found it hard to wrap my head around. But the idea is somehow it's a 2-player game. There are black and white stones, and you're trying to surround the other player's stone somehow to like eliminate them. Something.
And then
like
it's
that,
your
right?
points or something. Yes.
Yeah. A future topic actually, and I think we've mentioned on this in past episodes, that Go was actually encouraged for its spiritual benefits.
What? I
in
thought it was a
ancient
military
history,
strategy thing.
Yeah. Well, it was also, there was kind of a school of Buddhist thought around Go. It was seen as kind of a spiritual meditation as well. So anyway, that's
they wanted to be on our podcast, but it's too ancient. They're already passed on. But
we need to.
If we had a time travel machine, we would definitely interview those dudes.
After the Board Game Faith helicopter and rig, we get a Board Game Faith time travel machine.
Science.
And it would be great. It would be bigger on the inside than on the outside. I love it. All right. So shall we begin?
Yes, we shall begin.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna all right. Here we go. So this is a castaway. We're castaways on a desert island, and we're playing Go, and we have to culminate in a clap. Ready?
Hang on. Wait. Sound.
Do we have a sound effect?
Did it not work?
I didn't hear it.
Oh, I hate everything.
I could begin us with a bell.
Oh, that was preview. Why do you do that? We've got this button, but if you're not paying attention, it's on the preview setting. Okay.
Should we try it again? Sweet. Begin. Oh, that was the worst 3-hour tour I've ever been on. This boat ride is going to take a lot longer than 3 hours. Has anybody ever? Did anybody Google the history of the SS Minnow? Has this boat had trouble before? This is awful.
I know. In the scuba lesson, the guy was real. I mean, they didn't give me a tank. They just sort of pushed me off the boat, and I mean, they gave me no oxygen tank, and I sunk. It was very disturbing. And then they left.
I know, and I saw you there, and I reached out to you, and I went down too. We were both at the bottom of the ocean.
Thank God for the jet.
Still trying to get the water out of but now, thankfully, we crawled out on this desert island. By the way, my name is Daniel. It's nice to meet you, my fellow castaway.
My name is Lucius.
Lucius, it's very nice to meet you. And I guess we're stuck here on this deserted island, thanks to the SS Minnow sinking.
And I see no meat supplies, so we're gonna have to eat someone.
Uh-oh. I don't know. Well, let's take a look around. Let's take a look.
I don't know how to fairly decide who will be eaten on this deserted island.
Oh, look over there. I see a hot dog stand. I think we're saved from needing to eat each other. And
I'm
it's
not
being
eating those hot dogs.
It's staffed by seagulls, I think. So it's still deserted, but the birds are taking care of it.
I'm not eating that.
So we need a plan. Lucius.
We need a plan.
So first of all, shelter, survival, like food,
entertainment,
water, and entertainment. I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. So shelter, I'd say we use these giant palm fronds over here.
Okay.
And we construct a like a.
Lucius immediately builds a little hut with them.
I like it.
And starts a nice fire, which then ignites the palm fronds.
Oh no! Put it out!
Oh dear.
So we got shelter. Now
we're gonna have to build
food. There's the seagull-owned non-refrigerated hot dog stand over there, so we're good. We're good for that as well.
I'm not eating that. We could go fishing.
We could go fishing. We can go fishing. Good, but for entertainment, what can we do? All I see scattered about are these papaya seeds that, strangely, some of them are white and some of them are black.
It's interesting. There's the game Robinson Crusoe, and I would normally bring a copy with me in case I'm bored, but I thought I had an oxygen tank, so I didn't use my waterproof Robinson Crusoe board game pack. I sure would be handy now. Or perhaps we could play a different kind of game.
Yeah. What if we
build snow forts?
We could build snow forts, but is there snow? That's over a water issue.
Yeah, no, I think we may be here a while.
Okay, we could wait for it to get to winter on this tropical island.
If a polar bear shows up, we could eat it and use it for warmth. I thought they smelled bad on the outside.
How about we draw a grid here in the sand? We can draw a grid in the sand.
That's close to the tide. Not real good.
Oh, Daniel. Too close. Oh, there, it's gone already. We'll move it further inland.
Very good.
And what if we positioned these?
And while we're digging, I found a beacon here buried in the sand. Well, that's worthless. Lucius tosses it in the ocean.
I have no time for beacons. We're about to play a game.
Exactly.
That's right.
What's this crap doing?
Flare gun, toss it aside. This doesn't get any further to playing this game. So what if you took some of these black papaya seeds, and I'll take some of the white papaya seeds. By the way, I don't know why they're different colored, but lucky for us. And
one kind is poisoned, but we're not sure which one.
And if we eat them, then we can't play the game.
Correct. And whoever loses has to eat them to figure out which one is poisoned.
I like it.
Good.
All right. So how about, obviously, Lucius, you are a far more noble person than I. I can tell it just by talking to you. So how about if you go first?
My family goes back generations.
Yeah. Well, I love it. My family does not go back generations.
Go back from Germany.
My family just crawled out of the mud I think it was last Tuesday. It's been a bummer of a life because I crawled out of the mud last Tuesday and now I'm on a deserted island. I had all these high hopes for what was going to come next. So how about you place your seed first on one of the intersections on this grid, and then I'll place a seed, and maybe we can see who can surround the other person first.
And as I place it, I hear a weird clicking sound from deep below in the island. Click. Did you hear that?
I did hear that. What is that?
I don't know. But there was that TV show Lost. Maybe this island isn't everything that it appears to be.
Wait. Do you hear that? 23, 17, 9, 8.
Oh, I don't hear that. That's just you.
11, 23. There's this repeating number sequence. It's in my head.
It's your watch.
It's in my watch. Oh, you're right. I had it on talk mode. Sorry, I'll turn it back off there. Yeah. It was just 11 p.m.
That would have been cool if it was real though. Well, why don't you take a turn?
Okay. I'm going to put my black papaya seed. I'm going to put it here next to you.
Sound of gears rumbling beneath the island.
Uh-oh. Wait. Do you see that? Did that sand rumble over there? I think it's like something is opening up underneath it.
I think so.
Place another seed. See what happens.
A seed. Cling dong. Cling dong. Little top of a cathedral starts to appear beneath the sand.
And it's got a really wimpy bell on top. We've unearthed the ancient cathedral of
San Sebastian, the eternal married virgin.
I like it.
There's a little monk hanging there. He's very muddy. He's sticking to the side.
So we don't have to eat each other because look, the sanctuary is filled with
monk.
They're having a potluck dinner.
Oh my gosh!
An underground potluck
sacrament
dinner
of the Methodist Church.
It's awesome. Potluck. So or carrion dinner, as it's I think known around different parts of the world. Or so we're going to eat.
Well, we'll have to bring. What are we going to bring to the potluck?
A chicken casserole, which I happen to have here in my back pocket. I forgot I had along. So, and it's still warm. It's a little waterlogged.
It's a little muddy. From the salt.
Let me just rinse it out here. Just kind of squeeze it a little bit. Okay, there. It's good. It's
okay.
Good.
All right.
So now we're good. We don't have to eat each other,
Yay.
Kevin. We're so happy. I think maybe we should applaud.
Yay! 1, 2, 3. I got real quick.
that was great. That was great. We didn't get to play Go very much, though, did we? But
well, as we said, neither of us really knows how.
No. There's probably a Go master. Well, let's be honest. There's probably no Go master listening to this podcast. But if there is a Go master somewhere in the world who happens to hear this podcast, they're probably highly disappointed.
Shocked. They're absolutely shocked.
And we should ask their forgiveness for besmirching the noble game of Go.
Yes.
Well, anyway, Kevin, it's good to see you. How are you doing?
Good to see you. Yeah, pretty good.
Good.
Yeah. Slept. Actually, yesterday, I played racquetball for the first time in many, many years.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I slept really hard because I was so sore. So when I woke up, I felt as if, I don't know. It's like I couldn't move all night because I was so sore. So when I woke up, it was like reactivating. So it's kind of cool.
That's an intense sport. So are you feeling better this morning?
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, I'll be fine. I'm just grumbling, just old.
You know, we started playing racquetball a little bit a few years ago, but our son has really taken to it. And in college, he just plays it all the time. His college has a racquetball court, and
that's awesome.
He just loves it. He joined the racquetball club.
I thought it was a dated sport, like it's kind of on the way out. So that's cool that it's awesome. I had it at Wake Forest University where we met, and I had it as my health class. I got a B in it, but I took the racquetball class.
That's awesome.
I'm not very good at it, but it was fun.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten like really beaned by a ball, like in the racquetball, like it just really came off the wall? And
not in a way I remember, but it could have been the injury erased itself. Because it beamed me so hard, I don't have memories of it. No, I don't think so. I'm mostly worried about running into the other person or the wall.
Yeah.
So there's some very interesting moments where you're trying to keep the eye on the ball, but you've also got to judge where you are in relation to the walls and where you're going to hit it. So as I thought about it later, because I'm a nerd and I'm thinking about it, like most games, say tennis or basketball, you keep your eye on the ball, but racquetball, you really can't. Yeah. Because you've got to be aware of walls and the other person and just sort of calculating, sort of like playing pool or billiards.
Yeah.
So you're having to look, or you're turning around because you're trying to get the ball turned back to that wall.
Right. Because you might run into the ball.
It's a very surreal moment.
Or into the wall. Yeah.
Yeah. Because in tennis, I mean, you can run to hit it, and I guess you are having to calculate where the net is, but you don't have to worry about running into the wall.
Yeah. My favorite thing about racquetball, and I mean, you probably know this about me already, is, I'm not very coordinated. I don't have a good sense of self on the space-time continuum, and I'm very awkward and clumsy. What I love about racquetball is there's no out of bounds. And I love that because, like, every other sport, I hit a ball, there's like a 50% chance it's going to go out of bounds. But it never goes, there's no out of bounds. So I love that about racquetball. It's good for those of us who tend to propel balls out of bounds frequently.
So you can just get it to the wall and let it hit the ground. Right. You're good.
Yeah, well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad you got to play.
Me too.
Cool. Well, shall we start off with a opening of our mailbag?
Yeah, I love our podcast that in order to begin, we have to begin, but we already began. So now we start beginning again. It's like three begins. Who begat? It's very biblical. Who begat shall begat. It is. We've already begat this episode.
It's like a very tedious podcast genealogy. It is. This beginning begat that beginning.
This episode is sponsored by the Book of Numbers from
Methuselah. Yeah. I like it. Well, in the third generation of the beginning of this episode, let's open up our newsletter mailbag. We have a newsletter here at Board Game Faith, and if you're interested in subscribing, we'd love to have you join us. It happens every other week. It alternates with the podcast episode being dropped, as the cool folks say, and we try to highlight a newsletter subscriber. You can subscribe, by the way, by going to our link tree. And this week we're highlighting Keith. So Keith, we appreciate you listening so much. Keith is in Missouri. Woo, from Missouri. I'm in Missouri as well.
Home stater.
What's that?
Home stater from home stater. Your home state.
We asked Keith, what do you do? He says he's a pastor. So I got to be full disclosure. I know Keith, but I'm really grateful he listens. So he also is a pastor in Missouri, as I am. We say we asked what game are you into? He says right now he's into Civilization, the PC game, which I've never played. Have you played that, Kevin?
No, I might have tried it 20, 30 years ago, right? Or some version. I get kind of the vague idea. And there is a board game version of it that's supposed to be pretty good, right?
Yeah, and it's Sid Meier's too, isn't it? Yeah. Cool. So Keith, if you've never tried it, I guess there's a board game version out there too. But it's awesome. We're playing it on the PC. We ask our subscribers, what are you awesome at? Keith says he's awesome at baking, and I will attest to that. I've had some of Keith's baking; it's really good. And trying new things. And then
what sort of baking? Like breads, pizzas?
I think it was bread. What I had.
Bread's hard.
Yeah. Keith's a very talented, a multi-talented guy. He's kind of a Renaissance person, which is awesome. And then finally we asked, why do you listen to Board Game Faith? And Keith said there actually was a time when Keith and I were working together at a church, and we had a board game group at the time. And he says that, he saw how the board game group helped to build connection across generations at the church. And he talks about how it's really hard for churches, but I might say any other kind of place of worship, synagogues or mosques or temples, to build community, especially folks who are younger with folks who are older. And he saw that games were really good at doing that and turning that around. So that's why he's listening to Board Game Faith. So Keith, thank you so much for listening. We're really grateful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we invite others to subscribe and fill that little questionnaire out. And Daniel, full disclosure, with that data, we do what? We sell it to Google or Facebook, or we monetize it somehow?
We do sell it to Google. Yeah. Yes. And then we use the dark web to find out your credit card numbers.
Yes, we've DNA sequenced you already, Keith. So you need to have that mole looked at. We just want you to know
there's an evil doppelganger of Keith going about right now who only serves Board Game Faith.
He's the Gollum. Yes. See the door behind Daniel? That's for the other Keith. No, all of that's just to say this. We want to hear about you. We do nothing with it beyond just share some interesting bits to create community. That's all we're doing. So I know in this day and age, you have to think about, well, who's asking and what are you going to do with it? But we do nothing. So
that's exactly right. Yeah. Obviously, everything we just said was a joke, but we
it would be awesome.
It's maybe not a great marketing or financial strategy, but we're not looking to do anything with it. We just think you all are awesome. And we just want to get to know you more about you, right? Because we're so grateful that you tune in and you get to hear about us. There's that tune in word again. But we just want to get to know about you too, because we really like Board Game Faith to be a community. And every time we hear from our listeners or our readers, it just makes our day. It's a joy. And Kevin, I know you and I have really gotten to learn some really great ideas and insights from our listeners and readers who share things. So yeah. And speaking of great ideas and insights, there are a lot of them in the book Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal, with the subtitle Why Games Make Us Better and How They Can Change the World. And we're looking at encourage happiness, how games can help us develop habits that encourage happiness. And
my favorite chapter that I've read, and I have to admit I've not read everything here. It just felt it's new and fresh, and I never thought about this, but she's right. Most self-help books, part of our argument is self-help books don't really help because we as human beings don't change when we're alone, when we're solitary. We need other people, and we need it a little more interesting than simply, I should life hack something. So it just seemed like a real contribution to the area to think about how can games encourage human happiness in a way that maybe reading a book by yourself and thinking, I should lose some weight. I mean, that just ends up making you feel bad.
But that a lot of those habits that encourage happiness involve community,
or something just gamified. Like there's, this gets back to her second chapter that we need feedback. We need room to fail.
Right.
I'll give you a real life example. I, like many people, struggle with sleep. And one of the worst things you can tell someone is that, well, you should get 8 hours of sleep. Because the minute you tell them that and they don't, they're like, oh gosh, I'm going to have a bad day. I didn't get 8 hours of sleep. Well, guess what? People vary all the time, and you may just wake up early one day, and instead of thinking, well, now this day's ruined because I only got 6 hours of sleep, it's like, it's such an arbitrary thing.
Yeah.
So telling someone that is just not very helpful, but thinking of ways to socialize or gamify ways to make us happier it just works for us. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
That's a great insight. Yeah. Sleep's a great example of that too. I've sidebar related to our topic. I have found one thing that helps me to go to sleep if I have trouble. If it's a day when I've learned a new game, to try to review the instruction manual in my head as I'm going to bed.
Really?
And it helps me drift off to sleep. Now, I try to reconstruct the rules.
Now that is interesting. So my issue is when I learn a new game and I'm excited about it, I will dream about it.
Oh, interesting.
Because I think it's so much in my front-loaded RAM brain, that then it's like I'll wake up having dreamed that I was trying to play it or something. So it more haunts me, and it's not always a fun thing. Yeah, because like in the game, I'm trying to finish the game, but I can't finish the game, or it's this weird dream moments.
Yeah.
So reviewing the rules, you find helps you detach from.
It does.
Yeah, but that's awesome.
I think it's just probably a matter of how a person's brain is wired. I also can see how that would be kind of overly stimulating for other people too. So I think it's just
that's the weird. And even when I get a game, I can get a little anxious just because I feel like I've got to master this thing. So it is kind of a brain wiring. Like, it's stupid. It's just a game. Like, don't worry about it. But it's like I've got to fix it somehow.
Yeah.
And that's just a wiring fault somewhere.
Well, no, not necessarily a fault. It's like,
in the sense that I don't think it's not healthy or helpful. It may be I just have to deal with it, but like it should be fun. Like, why is part of me trying to defeat the fun of this game by thinking, I better check page 10 again. So I do think that's a bit of a fault because it's not a healthy thing, but I guess it's just how I attack stuff. But yeah, the larger point of sometimes self-help, which is you should get more sleep, really isn't going to help someone who's like, I'm worried I'm not getting enough sleep. Well, if you tell them to get more sleep, now they go to bed early and then they just lay there.
It's this endless cycle. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so the easiest thing is really to try to not get sleep. Is the weird bit about sleep. Like, the harder you try, sleep's not about trying. Yeah, you can't try to sleep. So
the more you will yourself to sleep, the more it's not going to work. Yeah,
it's not an act of will, correct? And some people don't have any issues, so they don't get that at all. And everybody has a bad night's sleep, and you know what? You'll be fine.
Yeah.
It might suck a little bit, but you'll be fine.
It's not the end of the world. Yeah, I think that's the main thing.
I love that idea of life hacks and making change pleasant.
Yeah. And what I really appreciate about her work in this chapter is that she approaches it from the perspective of different studies that have been done, different kind of research projects have been, which isn't necessarily something we talk a lot about on this podcast. Different kind of scientific studies or approaches, and and she begins the chapter by kind of talking about some of the findings of what she calls positive psychology. The things that we do that contribute to the nurturing of happiness in our lives. And she talks about
topic.
These three things that she says. There are others too, I'm sure, but she identifies three things, I guess, that have some evidence, some data behind them that help to nurture a sense of happiness in people. Practicing random acts of kindness, thinking about death for 5 minutes a day, and dancing more. And those three things are awesome. I love that. I love that. So, and then she talks about how she's designed these games that, they're not, they're games you live out in the real world. They're not around a table or necessarily around a screen either, because she writes primarily about video games. But these games that you live out in kind of the real world, the three games that she's designed that specifically are geared toward helping us get in the habit of these three things. Showing random acts of kindness, thinking about death briefly, and dancing more. Did you have any? And I thought the games were really interesting that she talked about it. Did you have any?
They were, no, The Cruel to Be Kind, which is it's kind of like a variation of a secret assassin type game, like a game that you play socially with but you don't know who's playing and who's not. But instead of the violent killing or mafia, you're doing random acts of kindness. That was awesome. And to be honest, I think I'm going to try to approach our Parks and Rec in Albemarle. We just started a social district because Albemarle's got some new restaurants coming because Charlotte's kind of moving in. I want to see if I could pull this off as a city. I'm going to try it. She's inspired me. I think we get enough people on a Friday night to do this. I just think that would be awesome. Idea. And everyone's going to love it once they understand what it is. Local paper, like there's no loss here. Except for
love
just
that. Oh,
yeah.
If that happens, tell us about it, please. And
if we
ever as a guest, we can
I'm on a live stream. Yeah. So I loved that one. And then the Tombstone one was so strange, but she's so right. That we
Isn't that great?
It was.
Yeah.
And she managed to make the ancient philosophers who talked about, philosophy as the practice of death. They made it sound more, I don't know, less creepy and more real that we do die. And we're so distanced from that because of funeral homes and modern practices, and we don't want to talk about these things. But the weird bit is, as she says, graveyards want people that own graveyards want you to visit them.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're abandoned, and we should care for the dead. You get the Mexican Day of the Dead, and that sort of idea of connecting with the past. And graveyards are just places of memorial, and those are nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with going and learning about people and reading the tombstones. And
I agree.
Like here, seeing the older ones where there's so many infant graves, and you realize how many children used to die of diseases.
Yeah.
Just
for our listeners, maybe who haven't read the book, the game that she designed to get us to think about death, it was called Tombstone Hold'em. And and it's basically a very physical playing of poker in a cemetery, a graveyard, like Kevin was saying. That, and the cards were the tombstones, and the shape of the tombstone determined its suit, and the dates on the tombstone determined its value. And you had a partner, and you had to physically touch your partner and two tombstones to make kind of what you're playing in this game of the Texas Hold'em, but it's play with tombstones. And so it was this kind of fun way, but you're in the presence of death. You're thinking about death. And
you're noticing names and dates. So you're connecting with people that, it really is. And you know what? I forgot about this, but in my Sunday school class as a high schooler, way back at Love's United Methodist Church, one of our teachers, if it's either Sunday school or youth group, he had us go out in the graveyard and sit out there and have a lesson out there. And I don't think it was related to death, but it was a similar idea of being comfortable in a graveyard.
Yeah.
It's not haunted. There's nothing going to happen to you, and we should remember the dead, or be interested in them. Even if you don't know them, you can look at the tombstones and the dates and the art and the designs and the quotes. And
I agree.
Yeah. So the nice bit of the church being the church, like somebody did that.
Yeah, I think. And I don't want to delve off too much into a theological subject here, but there's some theological traditions that talk about, very much go into kind of death as the enemy, and in some ways, I understand that. We talk about, that hope at the end of time when death is no more and all of that, but I think maybe one unintended, unhelpful consequence of that, sometimes I think of this theological emphasis on death as the enemy, is just this avoidance of talking about death at all costs, versus, or considering death at all costs, versus seeing death as you're saying, Kevin. I mean, it's kind of a part of the world we live in, a part of this life that we live in. I'm comfortable saying even, kind of a natural part of life. I think there are some theological circles that would not say that, but I think you're right. I think it causes us, I think it helps us to live a life with less anxiety and fear if we approach the death that way,
and a sense of time being precious. Because this is something Steve Jobs talked from Apple Computers, who practiced some form of Buddhism. I don't know how much he held to it. I don't know how much he practiced it, but even in the midst of his own diagnosis, he said that death was a great element of life because it gave the opportunity for something new.
Yeah.
And it made life precious.
Yeah.
And that's a little creepy. Yeah, and you're right that there's some disturbing elements to that, but there's some truth too. Like if life would be very boring and the world would be very crowded if it wasn't for death. And death can be awful, but it also means new life as well for future generations and new opportunities.
There is no resurrection or new life or whatever without a kind of dying first. Yeah.
And it does make life sweet and precious, knowing that it will not persist. So angels must be very bored because I guess they can't die.
Yeah.
They're just like,
unless
they
play Go. Because if they're all Go masters and they get practice to play Go, they could just play it for centuries.
Yeah. Great. Otherwise, they're just like, oh, another sunset. Boring. I've seen 8,000 million of them.
Another Mozart concerto. So
they should have heard the other guy. Unfortunately, he wasn't published. He was better, but stupid humans.
But what you were getting at there at the end, I think, is what I found especially interesting about this chapter was how much faith traditions have arrived at the same conclusion as what positive psychology has found, as what McGonagall's games are trying to develop habits for. Like the random acts of kindness. That's just in my view, kind of another way of just saying, love your neighbors, right? And hey, love your enemies too. That's what's more random than loving an enemy,
I think loving an enemy is harder because a random stranger I can be nice to because it costs me very little.
Right.
Somebody, it takes a little effort and energy, but the interaction's over.
Yeah.
But someone you don't like is much harder.
Yep. Yeah.
Because you have reasons to not do that. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. I think we also see it kind of, just in the really ancient, strong traditions of hospitality, in the ancient world of modern times, especially we see in Islam and just other faiths, thinking about death. We've talked before that, that's such a big tradition. The book of Ecclesiastes, I think, is a lot about kind of living your life in the view of death, keeping that before you. And then dancing more, there are a lot of religious traditions that just talk about kind of this delight in the divine. I think the book of Psalms is an example of that. The Sufi tradition in Islam, the sense of just kind of dancing before the Lord.
David dancing before the ark.
Described
in First Kings or something.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Or Second Samuel. No, I'm just embarrassing myself with my inaccuracies.
Well,
I'm a Baptist when you need them.
I can't remember the citation either, but I know, yes, David dancing before the Lord. Yeah.
Yes.
On a personal note, I think also what reminded me of, I tend to stress out about things and get anxious about things, and sometimes if it's really severe, kind of the detriment of my health. And this happened a couple times in high school where I actually kind of ended up in the hospital just because I was so anxious and stressed about things. And but what I remember was my doctor at the time said, Daniel, next time something you feel stressed about, just act silly, right? Just do something silly that's totally random. And what I took that to mean was dancing. And kind of from that moment on, just this random dancing has been kind of this big part of my life.
Wow.
And it's kind of and our family does it now. We just kind of randomly break into, random dance fests, around the house. And she's right. I just feel so much happier just after some random dancing. I should have listened to iCarly, all along.
Right.
iCarly.
Gosh, human reality is so interesting, and that somehow using your body could break so your mind's stuck in a way, right? Your mind's stuck on something, and doing something so off the cuff with your body could then get your brain to then shift gears is amazing and interesting and very cool. So that's great life advice. Wow. McGonigal should put that in her book.
I can't take any credit for it, but thanks to my doctor and to McGonigal and faith traditions. Anyway,
and back to death, the issue of death. I try to bring this up occasionally with students at Pfeiffer, like they're worried about a paper or something. Like, what do you? Or even my own kids are worried we're going to be late for school. Like, dude, people dying right now. We're worried about this.
It's not going to matter.
It's not going to matter. This is just a paper.
Yeah.
Just write something and do your best. Do a good job, and then move on.
Yeah. Good advice.
Yeah, it gives it. So, like like what you were saying, I think this is the connection for me. Is our minds get in a rut, and we need something to get us back into reality and perspective, which is usually whatever we're worried about is totally not that important.
Right.
Now, occasionally it could be like there's a bear coming at me. Right. So wild brown bear coming at me, going to kill me. I should definitely be worried.
Right.
But that's never happened. So most of my other worries were just stupid.
Yeah.
Such as being late for something. So
a year from now, 10 years from now, what's it gonna
right.
matter?
And so the cemetery reminds you of that. Like, how much did those people stress over things that now in the scope of time, through the sands of time.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of what we like about board games too, that can get epic like that. Like it has that epic feel. Like a D&D type casting for 2,000 years.
Yeah. I mean,
and the Bible will do that as well.
You're right. I mean, and also I think what I love about board games is when you play it, you can't help but think these thoughts of like, this really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, which in some weird way, like makes it really matter. You know what I mean? Yes. Like it's, you're intentionally engaging in behavior that nobody would say, oh, this is so serious. This matters so much. But in a weird way, it makes it matter more than all the other stuff. And in ways I can't quite explain. But
no, you're right, because you get into a game and it's almost working that stress muscle, and so you're really stressed about it. But yes, it and you may even win, and then later sort of have that sort of like, I won the game, like you get to have that glow. At the end of it all, then you have to realize that you still have to make dinner.
Right. I was talking to a friend about this the other day about, it kind of reminds me of the tradition of the Holy Fool. A lot of faith traditions have a tradition of the Holy Fool. Sufism and Rumi and Islam and Saint Francis and in Christianity.
Islam say more about the Islam bit. I don't know about that.
Well, and maybe I shouldn't have spoken about it, but the Sufi tradition. And Rumi, I don't even know if they would apply the words holy fool, but there's this sense of just kind of the ecstatic embrace of the glory of life, and it does, the Sufism, there's that tradition of associating is what gives us the whirling dervish, and in some ways, and I hope that term is still acceptable. I think that's a okay term. I apologize if it's not. But in some ways, this notion of somebody who's just spinning around for no good reason. I mean, what's more foolish than that?
Wow, I never thought of that as a weird kind of game.
But it's and so this tradition of the holy fool. There's this kind of theological thinking around this idea of the holy fool that in some ways that is one of the most powerful witnesses we can offer to the forces of kind of oppression and weightiness and heaviness and sinfulness, if you want to call it, of the world. That I mean, the world says, oh, this is so serious. This is so important. I am so serious. I'm so important. All of these matters are so important. And if you engage it directly, you're going to get sucked into it, right? I mean, if you engage it directly, it's this whole thinking about dualistic versus non-dualistic thinking. If you engage dualistic thinking, it's either or, right or wrong, you're going to become dualistic yourself too. You can't help it. What you do is kind of like, what Jesus did with the parables and like this. You offer kind of this this indirect addressing of it by talking about things that seem foolish. And in some ways, I think that's what games can do in this overly serious, somber world. It's kind of this holy, foolish witness.
The game
says,
is
I'm not going to engage with the world in this way, but I am engaging with it in more meaningful ways.
So the game is the holy fool.
Kind of, yeah. Well,
so interesting.
What do you think? I don't know. I kind of went off on a
No, I don't know. You're kind of blowing my mind, and I've got to do some thinking and reading, and because I guess slightly familiar with the holy fool. I've heard of it in terms of therapy or therapist or pastoral work. I've heard it apply to Jesus, or about in Shakespeare that some of the tragedies will have this fool character with the king. But thinking of it as either and the non-dualistic, like you're in the moment, that's fascinating. It reminds me, I read this book, and I read it because it has a connection to a theologian named Balthazar that I've studied, and he wrote the foreword to a book called Meditations on the Tarot, and that's the tarot cards. Now, real important asterisk around that, it's following, and this is deep catalog in the weeds here, but Carl Jung had this thing with the tarot cards, and they never used it for a form of telling the future. It's never divination. It's about elements of the human psyche. So each card is almost like an archetype within ourselves.
Oh,
and like that's what this,
like an ink blot, almost kind of like what you see in it, sort of about yourself.
It's more of modes of being.
Okay.
So, and interesting, the tarot cards have an element of that. Like there's one about justice, and there's one about mercy, and there's one that is the magician, and that's the first one. And so that book takes this weird Christian spiritual take on who's got Carl Jung and the tarot cards. But the point he makes is the first one is the magician, and the thing that's haunted me is that the way of practicing magic that it's advocating is seeing all of life as sort of effortless effort. Like that you're able to do something, but it's effortless. So you might think of the professional ice skater, that they make it look so easy. And what if all of life was that? Because it's like we weren't separated. What was the word you used earlier? Divided.
I'm drawing a blank. Sorry.
Thinking where you're separated from the world versus in the world. I'm perhaps to cut all this out. Non-dualistic type stuff.
When you're, I'm drawing a blank on that too. But standing apart from the world versus part of the world.
It's kind of the Buddhist Asian type approach to the world. Yeah. So that effortless effort, the magician is doing that with their whole lives, which in a way is it's sort of like the Quran verse, life is a game and you want to play it well and take it seriously, but it's also just a game. So what if you could live your life like the ice skater, which is effortless effort?
Ooh, I like it.
That would be the true magic. That's what. So in this, he's not advocating spells, etc.
Right.
They don't exist. Like that's all fiction. But he's advocating a way of life that makes the difficult seem easy. Sorry, you got me totally in a.
I love it. It reminds me of the old Indigo Girls song. The best thing you've ever done for me is to help me take my life less seriously.
Yes,
it's only life after all.
Yes, it's only life after all, and that's coming back to some of this.
Yeah,
I guess we're talking self-help, religious spirituality, but in the context, Jay McGonigal's got us thinking about how games are connected to some of these realities.
Well, speaking of Jay McGonigal, should we skip to chapter 13 real quick?
Yes, we probably don't have time to get to it, but we should. I'm looking for that book. You've got me curious now.
Oh, sure.
So you keep talking. I'm going to go.
All right. No, well, chapter 13 is a book about a chapter about collaboration, superpowers. And this is what I found especially interesting about the chapter. Jane McGonigal says that all games are collaborative, even the ones that we think are competitive. And I found that fascinating. You know, this idea that being being a part of a competitive game means that all of the players have to have this collaborative sense ahead of time that, hey, we want to play a game together. Hey, we want to agree to the rules together. Hey, we're going to agree that this is what makes a winner. This is what makes the loser. That even competition requires a prerequisite spirit of collaboration, and that ultimately all games are built upon collaboration because of what she calls this sense of shared intentionality. And I loved that. I thought that was a really great insight. Sometimes one of the kind of spiritual critiques of games is, it's just causing us to become more and more competitive. It's just competitive. It rewards competition, and I can understand that. But I think she offers a helpful corrective in this idea that even the competitive games are built upon a foundation of cooperation. In other words, if a person agrees to be a part of a game and to play a game and to abide by its rules, they're already agreeing to a certain set of rules with you, versus someone who says, "I'm not playing that game. I'm not going to be bound by these rules," and walks away. I don't know. I found that a really great insight, that all games are ultimately cooperative. And then she talks about that, for example, in the rise of cooperative video games. Again, McGonigal is especially focused on video games, but also on video games that have cooperative content. I think about things like Minecraft, right, where people can upload different Minecraft creations.
She mentioned that, and she didn't, but I thought of that as well. She mentioned that
Minecraft might have come to the fore after this book. I'm not sure, but yeah.
And the classic board game is Pandemic. For a lot of people, I think there were co-op games before that, but that was the one that continues to break the Board Game Geek records, and people commenting.
Yeah. Were you able to find the book that you were looking for, Kevin?
I did. And
tell us about the book that you found.
It's just a moment of indulgence, but this is the book, Meditations on the Tarot. It was written by an anonymous guy, I think in Germany, but they now have identified him. But he was kind of a layman. But there it is, and it's afterward by Cardinal Hans Urs von Balthasar. That's why I found it too. A Journey into Christian Hermeticism. You can see it's kind of a bit defensive. There's all these reviews on the back basically saying that the guy's not a heretic or crazy.
Right.
But here's what it says. I love this bit, page 8. Learn at first concentration without effort. Transform work into play. Make every yoke that you have accepted easy, and every burden that you carry light. And then it quotes Matthew 11:30 that Jesus says, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." Concentration without effort. That's being the magician. And there's something, I don't know, it seems like that's a theme of what McGonigal's making us think about.
Transform work into play.
Yeah, transform work into play. Exactly. And again, this book says nothing about predicting the future of tarot cards.
Right.
And tarot cards originally were playing cards, I think. They have origins with that, and then later they kind of morphed into this future telling thing.
I wonder what the etymology is of tarot. You know where the word tarot comes from? It's okay.
I do. It has, because I looked it up at one point. It has something to do with to trump, I think.
Okay.
Like to take over, tarot to maybe to take.
Okay. Interesting. Huh.
I'm probably wrong.
That might be a future Board Game Faith episode topic.
That would be fun. I would love it. Yeah. But this is a crazy thick book. It took me years to get through it. It's very dense and nuts. I shouldn't say nuts. That's mean. But I mean, it is kind of nutty. Because the guy quotes
Kevin, can we do another pause here?
And it's very
I'm sorry.
obscure.
Are you there?
It was like a hobby for him, I think. Yeah, so chapter 13 was interesting. I didn't know about this Beijing Olympic Games. It was interesting, but I guess I wonder if it's a little dated at this point.
Yeah, though I did. Yeah. For those of you who didn't read it, the idea is that to help develop a spirit of collaboration for people around the world around the time of the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games, McGonigal developed this game, this podcast. It's part of developing this podcast about the lost ring. Apparently, and kind of the mythology was this was a sport that used to be played in the ancient Olympics, but now it's been lost to history. But
it was all fiction, correct?
Yeah, and that there are a few clues to what it was, and the listeners worked together to try to reconstruct the rules.
I love that.
And to remake the game, and they started playing the game. And she kind of talked about this as a sense of nurturing a spirit of collaboration around the Olympics for people around the world, not just watching it all together, but being involved in a way. What I found interesting about it was she said it used an example of a technique called the chaotic story, which is, where you take a story and you break it up into 1,000 pieces, she said, and then people try to reconstruct the story from the 1,000 pieces. And that got me thinking about a couple things. One, are there board games that do that? And two, I guess it got me thinking about the faith traditions too. In a lot of ways, I think that's what a lot of faith traditions try to do. We try to piece together chaotic stories. I mean, I realize there are different ways of understanding the Bible or the Quran or the Torah. So I'm not trying to step on anybody's ways of understanding. I guess I'm talking about my own understanding as a Christian, as looking at the Christian Bible. As I understand it, there are all these different voices about their experience of God. And in some ways, the Bible is kind of this attempt to kind of bring together this chaotic story of this person's experience of God and this person's experience of God, and trying to knit it together into something cohesive and whole.
Except, I would argue the Bible in some ways fails because the chaos remains. So we have these different patchworks of authors and origins and titles for God. And so really the church then has to knit that into something that is collaborative, but also, for example,
I agree.
The Lord's Supper, Holy Communion, while it's attested in the Bible, it never tells us how to actually, what are the nuts and bolts of doing that?
Yeah.
And so faith traditions have different styles of whether it's taken while you're kneeling or standing up and the deacons pass it out, or it's a pastor, or so we have different answers to how do we do this thing that the Bible cunningly just says, do this in remembrance of me, but I'm not going to tell you how to do it. And Islam, as I understand it, and my knowledge is scant, I don't think the 5 pillars are themselves in the Quran.
Is that right? Okay.
I'm if I'm wrong, forgive me. That was a unintentional omission there, but I think I'm correct. And so Islam too is taking the Quran and saying, how do we live this out? And we live this out through the 5 pillars.
Right. And I
think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I agree. And I think I've heard that there's a kind of an accompanying body of ancient tradition in Islam, and I forget the name of it. But as there is in Judaism, that that accompanies the Holy Book, it's not seen on the same level as the Holy Book. And I apologize, I forget the name of it. The Hadith. That's it. Yeah. The
sayings of the Prophet, I think, and maybe
what is it in Judaism? The
Mishnah. That might be on this. It's not. Yeah.
I mean, okay.
But you're right. Those are. You could see those as ways to live out the original higher level teachings, which would be the Quran or the Torah. Yeah. It's true.
Anyway,
for Methodists, the Book of Discipline, it's a very exciting, sexy read. It's a hot read.
I would bless the Book of Discipline, but I would not put that on any kind of theological, scriptural level. But yeah, no, I'm with. So do you think, are there, Kevin, I'm interested, especially because I know how much you love narrative-driven board games. Do you think, how much do you think this idea of the chaotic story as a mechanism has translated into board games that you have played? We're trying to piece together a story that's been broken into 1,000 pieces. Have you ever seen that?
I think it really depends on the game. So Twilight Imperium is a game that I dearly love, and that is invited. In that game, people have written, I think, fan fiction and developed ideas about who these groups are and how they came to be, and you might even dress up to play it. So a game like that with very different characters, I can see. But a game like chess or something, you're not invited to create a narrative, correct?
Yeah.
It's pretty much playing. I guess you do create a narrative outside the game, which is, oh, remember you beat me last time, but I'm going to beat you, and you beat me on turn 5. So you are kind of creating a narrative of the play.
Right. As you recount it, what happened.
As you recount it, and as it's in your memories of, oh, I remember the time we played in outside in the park, and that was such a great game. So maybe, I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think that makes sense. The only games that came to my mind were games like Seventh Continent or Destinies, where there's kind of these little pieces of a story scattered on different cards, and as you reveal these different cards, but it's still a single author to that. It's not that
we're not collaborating. We're not invited to. Well,
right.
Yeah, we're not invited to collaborate on the narrative itself.
Yeah.
The purest version of that is D&D, where dungeon
master
that's a good example can plan things out, but it really is a collaborative effort of what the characters want to do. So a good dungeon master should never tell you no when you want to do something. What they want to do is say yes, but, and then this is what might happen, or this is how it, and so the DM's got to bring it back to hopefully the main narrative, but you always want to empower the players. Yeah. So if you go in and say, well, you can't do that, well, that's not any fun. So if the player wants to climb the tree and set the top on fire, then you figure out a way to roll for it.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
It is.
It reminds me, I've been, since we begin our episodes with improv so much, I've been trying to learn a little bit about improv, which I still, obviously, as our listeners heard, I've got so much more to learn on that. But that's like the first rule of improv is you never say no, right?
I didn't know that.
You say yes and.
Yes and. Yes.
So if your partner says something, you say, yeah, and
this.
So you never shut down.
You never shut down.
So just like playing D&D in a way. Yeah.
And it is collaborative between what the dungeon master has planned, what the players do, and then the dice, which no one knows how the rolls are going to go. So that also is a weird way creating meaning and collaboration is luck.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Gosh.
Well,
this makes me want to play some games.
Yeah,
and one last thing Jane McGonigal says, I love this on this chapter, is GG, good game. And she's right. There's this sense that you thank the others for participating in what was a good game, which required their time and their attention and hopefully their desire to win.
Right.
Because otherwise it's kind of a pointless exercise.
Right.
There has to be a win condition. Their willingness to play and to play as well as they can.
Right. To collaborate in this gaming endeavor, to be a part of it. Yeah, whether they won or lost. Yeah, I love that. GG. Well, Kevin,
GP,
GG.
good podcast.
Man, BAY, back at you. Bay.
Oh, next episode, 2 weeks. Dos semanas.
Yes. Actually, we are. I think we're going to be taking our very first break, aren't we?
We are,
Kevin. Yeah. So here in the United States, in a couple weeks, in our part of the world, it's a holiday. In a couple weeks, so we're actually going to be taking a break next time, but we'll be back again after that. Our newsletters will keep coming out. But when our next episode does drop, again, as the cool people say, we have our very first returning guest. Kevin, would you like to share that good news with our listeners?
Ali Karar, a friend of the podcast and our first guest. We'll talk a bit about we'll follow up on some other things we discussed, and we're going to discuss representation in games, but also the interesting topic of how Islam views Jesus, because that's sort of a touchstone between two of the world's great religions and two Abrahamic religions, because Islam has a place for Jesus, but it's different than the Christian point of view. And that'll be an interesting conversation to hear and learn and discuss. So I know some of it, but I've never discussed it with a Muslim. And so that will be interesting. So Ali Karar is a practicing Muslim from Pakistan, right? But lives in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. And a board game reviewer.
Reviewer,
on YouTube.
Karar 2K
Yep.
was his handle on YouTube and things. And he has great taste in games. So someday, hopefully, I will game with him in real life.
That would be awesome.
Yes.
That'd be awesome.
Yes.
Well, most of all, we want to say thank you to you, our listeners, for listening. Thank you so much for, and I can't say tuning in. Thanks so much for pressing that button on your screen. We appreciate that so much. Please know that you are a really important part of this Board Game Faith community, and it is a real gift that you gave a part of your day to listen.
That's
and be a
right.
part of this. Yeah, you matter to this community, and we hope to hear from you. Kevin, what are ways that they can?
Yeah, let us know what you're playing and what you're thinking about the episode, the material, or if you've read Kate McGonigal, reach out to us so that our lives we get some nice feedback. So you can contact us through email, which is info@boardgamefaith.com, or Instagram, boardgamefaith, or Patreon. You can throw us a couple of bucks as a hat tip to us, and that's Board Game Faith. And we have Discord, which is Board Game Faith, and we have a newsletter, which is boardgamefaith. Button down.
Yeah, button down.
Email
.com/button. Actually, if you just go to our link tree, link tree is in our Instagram.
Strangely, as Daniel is awesome.
What? Who changed it?
Who changed?
Lies. No. No. However you connect with us, we'd love to hear from you, and we thank you so much for making us a part of your day.
Yes, that's right. Take care, everybody.
Good game, Kevin.
Good game. GG. GP.